Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you for downloading the Faith Life podcast at Discovery Fellowship Church. I'm your host, Pastor Nathan, and I'm not here this week with Pastor Matt. He is on a well-earned vacation, but fortunately, I am joined by my amazing wife, Alexis.
Hey, guys.
And so now the other thing you might notice, if you have been one of our video watchers in these past couple weeks, we actually don't have video today. I'm recording in my basement, actually, and I don't have all the cameras and lighting, and the backdrop's not that exciting. And so we're doing just audio this week, but I figured just audio is still better than nothing. So as we get started today, I want to remind you, if you haven't done so already, please take a minute, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you downloaded this. We ask you to do that because when you leave an actual review, and especially if you leave a written review, that helps the algorithms start to recommend this to other people as well. And so it really does help us a lot if you take a minute and leave that review. So if you haven't done so already, please go and do that. And as always, if you'd like to be a part of the show, you can email podcast@dfchurch.com. That's podcast@dfchurch.com, and we will read your letters, your comments, your questions here on the show. Now, as we get started today, we're going to hit a little bit of the news. I think the first part that jumped out at me in the news this week, I don't know if there's a ton to say about it, but it's just kind of sad news. Alexis, we read that Timothy Keller has passed away at 72 from cancer.
Oh, it's so sad.
It is. But then that made me think, like, it's one of those weird things where as a Christian, you know, Paul says, death, where's your sting? So it's like, it almost makes me feel bad to say I'm sad about it, because I am sad about it, and should I be?
Yeah, and I mean, he's been fighting pancreatic cancer for at least the past 3 years, if not more. And so it's more sad for us, right? We've lost a teacher, a pastor, the very definition of a shepherd. I owe a lot of my faith to Tim Keller. Videos and sermons, fantastic teacher in a very dark part of our country, which actually that kind of leads into our discussion today too, as far as bringing light into dark places. So yeah, it is really sad. It's a loss for our community.
I know. I was thinking, like, you know, his books obviously have been really popular, but just his preaching and honestly his presence, this is kind of maybe going to sound a little bit funny, but his presence on like Twitter, he was very, very active there, and very apparently he got into a little bit of hot water lately. I don't know. I hadn't heard a lot about this, but as I was reading and hearing what people had said, like in the past couple of years, he has made statements that are more like politically, people accused him of being like not politically conservative enough, which is hilarious.
I read that about him.
Because what he would say is that neither party is representing Jesus perfectly, and we can't make our faith about political parties.
Yep.
Which I agree with. And so it's really funny that is what got him criticism. But
yeah, I mean, walking that middle line, that's a little bit probably more like Jesus, right? Like Jesus was too conservative for the radicals, too radical for the conservatives, even in his time, and we claim to follow him. The other thing I love about Tim Keller, real quick, while we're talking about his passing, is he was known by his people, by, you know, fellow teachers and preachers and everyone in kind of the Christian community and teaching circuit, as someone who genuinely loved lost people. And I read about him this week that he had the unique gifting and ability to teach and preach very well, scripturally, doctrinally sound, but with that effect that brings the gospel and actually speaks into the culture. And so that's another reason why it's a huge loss, because not everyone is gifted that way.
Yeah.
You know?
It's definitely a huge loss. And I remember it was kind of like when Nabil Qureshi passed away. It was a similar thing where he had stomach cancer, but he was young. He was my age. And so
he was 33, I think, when he passed away from stage 4 stomach cancer. And I cried. The day he passed away, leading up to it. I followed all of Nabil's vlogs leading up to that. It's hard to lose Christians, even though we know that they've kind of gone on to glory, you know?
Yeah, and with him, it was different in that he was like at the kind of the beginning He was just really starting to, write books and speak and publish things. Whereas like Tim Keller was 72. And so while it's sad, he has this huge body of work that he's left with us.
Yeah, that legacy.
That we can have. So, well, that is very sad. But the other news, there's a couple other news stories I wanted to hit real quick before we jump into our main topic of the day. The next one I saw, the headline is this: tipping culture is out of control. TikToker goes viral for claim that Ben & Jerry's cashier got upset when she didn't tip for a $2 ice cream cone. I was just thinking about this the other day, and that's why I pulled this one up, because it made me kind of laugh. I think that looking at every time I go to a store now for anything,
literally anything,
like they're asking for a tip. And so this viral TikTok video was this woman was at Ben & Jerry's. She got a $2 ice cream cone and was like, I'm not leaving a tip. Like, you literally just handed me a cone. I'm not going to leave. And she said the options on the screen weren't percentages. They were like $1, $2, $3. She's like, it's a $2 ice cream cone. I'm not tipping $1 on that. That seems silly.
Minimum of 50% tip.
Right. And so apparently the cashier got all upset and was like waving her arms like huffily. And like, it's kind of a funny thing, but it's interesting. It feels like we've gone to tips are something that you do at a restaurant or somewhere like that, where somebody's actually like a server, where they are attending to you throughout the course of your meal, bringing you food, checking to make sure there's anything you need. Like, it kind of makes sense, at least a little bit, that there's a tip there.
Right. I think the restaurant industry, and unless stuff has like drastically changed in the last 10, 20 years, I think it's the only one where people are compensated more, poorly because the expectation of tips, right?
Right. They aren't required to pay minimum wage at restaurants. They can pay like $2 or $3 an hour because the assumption is tips will make up for it. Now, this is also something that's uniquely American, and the rest of the world, they don't tip like that. They just pay higher wages. And so it's definitely interesting, first of all, that it's in restaurants here, but we've kind of gotten used to that. But now, like I said, it's everywhere.
Yeah, I was going to say, outside the restaurant industry, I feel like even if it is just America, like, it shouldn't be expected, But it totally is. I mean, we've had a couple, you and I, Nathan, a couple run-ins in the past few years where people are like grumpy if you don't tip.
It's crazy. And somebody else in this article I was reading was mentioning that they thought it was especially funny. They went to Starbucks and bought a gift card. So they got like a $20 gift card, and the thing came back up with, do you want to leave a tip? It's like, you just handed me a gift card. Like, why would I tip you for that?
Right.
It's weird. So I don't know if it's just a sign of how like the economy is really bad. People are realizing maybe with these employers, like, I can pay my people less and expect tips.
Yeah.
I also wonder if some of this, it feels like a lot of this started with COVID, because during COVID, there was a lot more stuff being like delivered, and there was more stuff like coming out, and like people were having to work, and they were like, you're the first line, and you're the, what did they call that? Essential workers or something like that. Right. And it's like, and so we need to tip you. I don't know. It just seems maybe it coincided, or maybe it's just a way.
That probably put it over the edge. I mean, this might be kind of 1950s-ish, but it's like tipping should be above and beyond, and it should be based off of your work and the quality, and you should like absolutely astound me with your services or your service for you to earn a tip, and it should be earned.
I 100% agree, and in fact, I've left, and this is, I haven't done this often, but I have at times when the service was exceptionally poor. I have left a very bad tip, because I figured if I leave 0, there might be like, I forgot. But if I leave,
purposeful,
like 10 cents.
Oh, this leads into our conversation really good today.
It does.
Really well,
because it feels like I intentionally did that. And the very, very few times that I've done that, and it's been very few, I have actually written a note, usually with it, and said, here's why I'm leaving you a bad tip.
Yeah, I think I've been with you one time when that happened, and it was very harsh, but I knew you were trying to send a message. So,
well, I don't think I should be expected to tip just to tip, right? Like you said,
that's what it comes back to.
It should be a positive affirmation of a job well done.
Yeah, Absolutely. And you earn it. And it all ties into your work ethic.
And so then let's head to our last story, which is going to tie directly into our main topic.
I love it. They all do so far.
They all do a little bit.
Act? Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. And so the next one is about some of the massive losses that both Target and Bud Light have experienced. So I think we maybe had even talked on this podcast a little bit about Bud Light sales tanking. Mm-hmm. But in this last week, we've learned that now Target, the newest target of a boycott, lost another $9 billion in this last week. And I don't know if there's any other end in sight on that. So their shares have dropped more than 12.6% since a week ago, which amounts to a $9.3 billion loss in value. And then looking at Bud Light, they have lost another 14%, which is now $18 billion in market value as well for Bud Light. And so
wow. Real quick, it kind of gives me like a little bit of hope for our culture, Yeah. I hope that people are seeing through some of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So as we look at these boycotts have been primarily conservative-led boycotts as kind of a backlash against certain, seeing an increase in LGBTQ elements and things like that within these brands. And so for today's topic, I wanted to ask the question, what should a Christian's role in this be? Like, should we participate in these boycotts? Should we advocate for these boycotts? Like, should we be out there, sharing, here's how I boycotted this today, or, trying to encourage others to boycott? So those are the first kind of questions. And then I think to kind of further go into that deeper, does it make me like, if the answer to those is yes, as a Christian, I should boycott these companies, does that make me a bad Christian if I don't? Or does it make me a hypocrite if I ever go to some place? Because I think, we'll talk about that as we go. I have thoughts on that. But what do you think, Alexis? On the first question is like, what should our response as a Christian when we see these boycotts? The first thing you said was kind of gives you hope, but like, what should our response be? How should we interact with these?
Sure. Well, the first part I mentioned, it kind of gave me a tiniest sliver of hope for our culture. And I'm speaking, maybe for non-Christians, even for those who don't believe yet, who don't ascribe to our beliefs yet. And I say that because I saw a TikTok video this week of a mom who was so angry because she had gone into Target looking for bathing suits for her kiddo. And this video has gone viral on multiple platforms. You might have seen it too. Where, I don't know, she found these pieces that were more gender neutral and they had like binding material in them in certain parts. And she was outraged as a mom, just cussing, in the video and saying like, this is unacceptable. Parents, you need to stand up, you need to do something, or they will continue to make this clothing. And then her greater point was, they're targeting children. We should not be okay with that. And that gives me hope for parents, whether you are a Christian or not. Parents need to lead. We don't follow our children's lead. We need to step in and lead and guide and shape and help our kids go in the way that we want them to go. So that was what I meant by, the tiniest hope that people are not just automatically getting sucked into this. But as a Christian, I think, the first passage that came to mind,
I like that.
Matthew 5:38-40. Jesus is speaking and he says, "You have heard it, that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well." And so what is the greater principle of that passage? I think of just the humility of Jesus and how that is so countercultural to us as Americans, where if we don't like something, we don't agree with something, or we are wronged in some way, there's this incensed kind of feeling. There's this pride that wells up where we say, no, that's not right. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I believe, and I'm going to let you have it. So all that to say, I think the greater principle is, if we're following Jesus, he has very much so a kind of coexist with your enemies, love them, serve them. Yeah. So I think that's a huge part of how I try to live, especially when we talk about things like boycotting. I don't think I'm a boycotter as a Christian, honestly.
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, I see every side of this issue, I think, in some way or another, because on the one hand, I think, first of all, if you don't like what somebody is doing, then I feel like, yeah, don't support it. Don't buy it. Like if you know that your money is going to fuel this type of organization or something like that, like definitely don't support it. And that's, I think, fine to do that.
Absolutely. But I think it should be, like quiet,
right,
and humble, and winsome. I've heard it said before, and I love this. And this is how I try to live my life, and how, as a family, we try to like guide and raise our kids too, is as Christians, let's be known more for what we are for in this world. Yes, even though it's dark. Yes, even though there are parts that are gross and yucky and people do this and we don't like that. Okay. But Jesus said we needed to be in this world, but not made of the same substance as this world. In it, but not of it. And so, yeah, what are you for? That's what I want to hear. Not what are you against, not what you hate, why you disagree with this. Hold those beliefs. I mean, definitely we all do, but I think there's a way to carry that. And
it's tough because I think I agree with you, and that's how I try to live as well. But I think at the same time, then we look at these things like these. This is a very successful boycott of Target.
Yeah.
And that's only because people have been so vocal about it.
Right.
Right. If everybody was just quietly boycotting, then maybe nobody would hear about some of these things that are being supported by the organization, and then it wouldn't happen. And so it's like treading that line of like, can we, can certain people will communicate this, and then I don't think I need to go out there on Facebook and be like, yeah, I'm with this, I'm boycotting this, and I'm going to be real nasty about it. But I think some level of vocalization of it by at least certain people is helpful in getting out that this can happen, or that Target is supporting these things.
Yeah, and I really don't want to come across as, never say anything at all.
Right.
It's more the heart, the root, the motive, and your tone.
Right.
Right. So you can be vocal. I mean, he wasn't, well, actually he was kind of boycotting in a way, like Martin Luther King Jr. Like he stood up and he spoke and he was firm and he shared truth. And I believe it was loving and unifying and winsome. Right. So a counterexample to that is anytime I see, like a 1-star review from a lot of people, like on Facebook or Google or whatever, it's like, depending on your words and your tone, I think less of you sharing that review more than I do about the product or the organization. And now, that you would go out of your way to share just like a 1-star review. I don't know.
I guess it all depends on, like you said, the tone and when the content of the review.
And the motive, yeah.
There's definitely times in which you want to warn people about a terrible service or something like that. But again, if you've just got that nasty, entitled, I hate to say it, the quote unquote Karen attitude, then I'm not gonna look at you as I'm gonna look worse on you as the person than what you were reviewing.
Yeah. So it
sounds
all
like
about
how you present it.
It sounds like these Target boycotters are not sounding like that if it's having an effect.
So they have, all right. So there's been the one designer. Now people have been saying he's like a Satanist or something. He's not an actual Satanist. Like I've looked into this guy a little bit. He does not. He's an atheist, which actually most Satanists are atheists. But regardless of that, he doesn't believe in a literal Satan. He just uses satanic imagery because that's what he does as an artist. I don't think that makes it any better, but I guess it's okay for us to make sure we're not misrepresenting what's happening, right? So this guy who uses satanic imagery as well as very anti, if you do not support Pride Month, he is very against you, right? Like he, some of his other artwork. And so he was contracted by Target to do a lot of merchandise for Pride Month for Target, and they have cut that connection, and they've pulled a lot of his, I think most of his stuff out, as well as this is kind of funny, in these more southern stores, they've moved the Pride section to the back of the store.
Yeah.
So that it's not right out front,
I heard
because
about
there's been
that.
people like getting into confrontations. So now this gets into the second part. It's like, all right, so if you're going out there and you're like threatening the lives of Target employees or knocking down merchandise, from a Christian perspective, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'd say that's that whole kind of turn the other cheek, you know? At what point do your convictions lead to, I don't know, violence? Again, it brings me back to that passage. We are to be in the world, but not of it. And so we should expect this to happen. We don't have to like it, but we should expect it. And so what I see a lot of Christians doing is we turn our noses up at every corner, every chance, because we're just perpetually offended by everything going on. Instead, expect it and engage the lost, engage the darkness, engage these types of opportunities, even in the front of a store, with love and grace and compassion. Here's a huge component: compassion.
Okay.
Why are they seeking these things out? What is the lie that they have been fed and they're believing?
Right.
And how do we counteract that with the gospel?
I like that.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just such, it's a weird thing because it's Pride Month. And so every big retailer is afraid of like upsetting this demographic to the point that, or they just genuinely maybe support these demographics to the point where everything is about that for the whole month of June. Right.
Right. At least in America.
Right. Well, I don't know worldwide what it's like in other places. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Did they do Pride Month? If you're in England or Australia or Singapore, I don't know. Let us know if they celebrate Pride Month there. Again, email podcast@dfchurch.com. Now, the other thing that's interesting, that as I was looking at this, kind of the counter side of this, I'm remembering that it's so funny because, again, everything is so political. But a few months ago, we had a very similar situation play out, but on the other side. And what it was, there was a new Harry Potter video game coming out. And yes, it used to be that we would expect the same side that's upset right now would have been upset at Harry Potter, like calling for boycotts of it. But actually, it was the super liberal left-leaning side was calling for boycotting Harry Potter, this new game. Because J.K. Rowling, I don't remember how you say her last name, has made comments that people are saying are transphobic. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, looking at what she has said, I don't think there's anything that, I don't know. I think the word phobic is just thrown around so much about everything. And I think it's overused. Mm-hmm. But regardless, there were people who did not like what J.K. Rowling said. And I think looking at some of the comments, I don't think a lot of people actually know what she said. I think a lot of people just read that she said things that were transphobic, quote unquote, and so are just super angry, like in tears and angry and demanding that if you buy this game, you do not support their community. And there was a website that you could type in the username of any Twitch streamer, which Twitch is where everybody streams video games, and it would show you if they had streamed that game so that you could go harass them for streaming it. Like, there was a lot of anger over this game in the weeks leading up to its release. And now as we look at, within February 23rd is when I'm looking at this news article. So it had been out for just like 2 weeks. The game had been out for 2 weeks when this was written. So I don't even know up-to-date numbers. But in those first 2 weeks, it sold 12 million copies, generating over $850 million in sales revenue, making it the biggest launch ever. So this is an instance where there was a boycott that was trying to get started, and it didn't work. Nothing happened for it. And so I think it's really funny because when people started boycotting Bud Light and when people were saying boycott Target, I have seen people, because I try to follow people kind of across the spectrum of politics. And so as like people were boycotting Bud Light, I was watching left-leaning liberal people say, this is so dumb. You shouldn't be boycotting this beer. I mean, how dumb are you to think that you should, like, you're standing against this company just because they sent a can of beer to a transgender person, like calling out conservatives for being so dumb, when just 2 months ago, these same people were demanding that everybody boycott Harry Potter. So it's really kind of funny.
Well, and the hypocrisy there. I mean, that's coming from the group that preaches total acceptance, right? That's the first thing I think of. And there's so many people who have left that community, and they desperately wanted it. That's why they are drawn to it. They feel a certain way. They have dysphoria. This group claims that we'll bring you in and will love you, without conditions. And the people who are coming out are just saying, like, it's the most hateful group.
Right.
And so I think that's not to attack them. When I say that, it's on all sides. We are so human, so fallen, and we all need not really acceptance, but I'd say like repentance. We need to go a new way.
I like that.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of funny. This all actually ties in a little bit to this week's upcoming sermon. So I know we're going at our main Sunday morning sermons through the book of Ephesians. And this week, Pastor Matt is preaching, and the passage is going to be about how we are to walk in the light. Mm-hmm. And how following Jesus changes the way we live. And so as we kind of bring this main topic to a close, Lex, what do you think, like the big takeaway of how can we engage in this world, loving people who are lost, standing with our principles when it comes to like companies we support and places we shop? Like this is such and actually I never finished the show, but even from what we watched, I remember this being part of the thing. If you ever watched The Good Place, mm-hmm. and there was this whole subplot about like when they tallied up your, how good you were in heaven, which is kind of it's its own weird concept. But the principle of it, or like one of the ideas behind the show, is that when you look at what people do, nobody is ever actually doing anything morally good anymore, because everything is so interwoven, and every time you do something, you're downstream somewhere supporting something negative. And so while we don't believe that living a good enough life, or, you go to heaven because you shopped at the right stores or didn't shop right, we don't believe in any of that, obviously. But at the same time, as somebody who wants to follow Jesus, as who wants to really make sure our life is oriented after being more like him and showing the world that same look, how do we navigate this modern landscape?
Yeah, I think that's a huge question.
I know that could be its own podcast right there, but I would love a one-sentence answer that completely summarizes. I'm just kidding.
No kidding. So much pressure, guys. Email podcast@dfchurch.com and help me out.
Right, you're answering.
Well, the first thing I'm thinking of as you ask that is in any sphere of life, whether it's commerce, family, definitely relationships, the things we engage in, again, with that framework of being in the world but not of it. Like I have been placed here. God has entrusted me in this time, in this season, from Esther, for such a time as this, right? Like right. You are here on purpose. To thrive and to shine God's light and to look different and to be different, to be salt and light, agents of change. The first question I would ask then is, in those spheres, is redemption possible? Can we enter this? Can we spend our dollars? Can we share our beliefs, again, in a humble and winsome way, in such a way that redemption comes from it?
Right.
Here's the thing, guys. When we withhold our presence, when we withhold our dollars, maybe, and again, I think the dollars one specifically, that's going to be personal conviction. And you get that from the New Testament, food sacrificed to idols. Some Christians were okay with that. Some were very much so not okay with that.
Right. That's where my mind went real quick, is like when Paul talks about, there's this discount barbecue being sold after it had been sacrificed to an idol. And some Christians are like, how can your money go to support that? You're buying things that were sent to false gods. You are paying for that. And some Christians are like, well, it's cheap meat, and I know that those are all fake anyway. But again, the question could be asked, well, but your money is still supporting that temple that continues to purport that false god, and so are you indirectly causing that? But Paul, like you said, says that's a personal conscience issue. Mm-hmm. That if that's going to be sinful, if you are going to be sinning by doing that and feel that you've betrayed God in that, then don't do it, but don't look down on another Christian who does. And I think that's actually a really good parallel into the spending money thing now.
Yeah. So, I mean, exactly, right? So to kind of sum it up, every sphere of influence that you have, is redemption possible here? How can I bring the gospel into this situation? How can I shine light? How can I definitely be an ambassador, as in a representative of Jesus, and don't misrepresent him. We don't want to be the ugly, hateful, loud, name-calling. Definitely stand for truth and have conviction, but again, humbly, winsome, and with the effect that we are infiltrating a dark place that we were intended for with the gospel.
I really like that. Well, that kind of wraps up the main segment. So again, email us at podcast@dfchurch.com. Let us know what you think. Do you support these types of boycotts? Do you think it's useful, effective, as a Christian or as not a Christian? Let us know what you think. And we're going to move into my other favorite segment, which is where we ask ChatGPT something. And today, Lex gets to live react to some of these fun prompts. As always, if you would like to support us and sponsor this segment, we would love to be able to try out ChatGPT 4. And so if you would like to support a month of us using ChatGPT 4, email podcast@dfchurch.com, and we will get you set up as supporting that. We will read in whatever ad or promotion you want for either yourself or a business you run, as well as let you come up with a prompt that we both live react to. But this week, here's the prompt I gave it. It's kind of funny. Here are 10, I asked it to give me 10 lesser known Bible stories that could have easily been turned into blockbuster movies. As a movie person, Alexis, I thought you would like this.
Okay.
Now, they do play a little bit fast and loose with the term lesser known. Some of them, you might be like, yeah, I had to look up a couple of these. I was like, are you just making stuff up? Because actually, I didn't remember that story. And some of these, I was like, well, that's not the lesser known, but whatever.
Interesting. Hey, I got to tell you real quick. Yeah. I love this segment. I love how popular it's been.
Yeah.
But I do got to throw out here, I feel like when I think of AI, it's like God made us in his image. And then we went and made AI in our image, and how often AI is so dumb.
I was going to say, so does that make AI a gift from God?
That's a Clerks 2 reference.
Speaking of movies. All right, so number 10, lesser known Bible stories that would have made good blockbuster movies. Number 10, The Battle of Shamgar and the Ox Goad.
What?
An intense historical action movie centering around the warrior Shamgar, who defends his people with an unconventional weapon, the ox goad, against overwhelming odds.
Wow.
From the Book of Judges, a guy who just went out and started whacking people with an ox goad.
Dude.
Something you poke a cow with.
Somebody should call Peter Jackson. I feel like there's potential there.
I think that would be pretty fun. All right, number 9. This is where we start playing fast and loose with lesser known.
Okay.
The Forgotten Dreamer. The story. Oh, actually, okay. So this is where it's lesser known. The story of Joseph's brother, Benjamin.
Oh.
Okay, so focusing on a captivating family drama exploring the perspective of Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother, as he navigates jealousy, redemption, and forgiveness.
Oh.
Now, see, that actually would be pretty good because we always go from Joseph's perspective, right?
True. But you know what's funny? I feel like Benjamin was favored also. Wasn't he?
He was the next best thing.
The second favorite.
And, here's probably why we don't do that movie. Because if you centered on that, the entire time Joseph's in Egypt and he's like dealing with Potiphar and helping the Pharaoh and the dream interpretation, none of that would be there because Joseph's just chilling back home. Or Benjamin is just
Benjamin's at home.
Back home. So maybe it'd be kind of boring.
Yeah, it'd be... I don't know, like a Wes Anderson movie.
Okay, I get behind
sitting
that.
around the house.
Number 8, The Incredible Escape of Peter from Prison.
Oh.
A suspenseful prison break film. Well, okay, showcasing Peter's miraculous escape from prison aided by divine intervention and unexpected twists. So as a prison break film, that makes me think of like, all right, we've got these guys, they're in jail, they're going to start planning and plotting this convoluted plan where they have to like get the guards and like steal a disguise and all this stuff. Whereas Peter's prison break was just like earthquake knocked the walls down and then the guards let him out because they didn't run.
Hey, don't forget the worship. There was worship in that story. That's so funny. For our friends who are super into the Oceans movies, I feel like that would be the style. So maybe that's how I can contribute. I'll like line up the style and the directors.
Right. And so I wonder how you do that since it's primarily all divine intervention and not really a lot of Peter intervention.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that would be fun. Again, a well-known story, though.
Interesting, yes.
Number 7, this one's more interesting. The Prophetess Huldah, Secrets of the Lost Scroll.
That feels like Indiana Jones.
A thrilling archaeological adventure where a modern-day scholar discovers an ancient scroll written by the Prophetess Huldah, unveiling forgotten prophecies and unlocking a global mystery.
Dude, so when they inevitably update the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland, there's your option.
Add in the prophetess.
And you're
Hoba.
totally being in the world and definitely not of it, and people won't understand, and I would be there for it.
Number 6, the miraculous journey of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. An inspiring historical drama recounting the encounter between Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, exploring themes of faith, inclusion, and divine guidance.
Interesting.
So this guy's broken down on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Philip is passing by. He stops and says, hey, can I share the gospel with you?
Yeah.
And then he does. The guy and his whole family says, let's get baptized. And then it says like the Spirit took Philip away, but the Ethiopian eunuch was just dancing and rejoicing and went about his way too. So is that like he teleported him? Or is it just like he felt led by the Spirit to move on? I hope it's teleported.
Well, I know
because that makes a better movie.
I know you're hoping for that. That makes it a little more sci-fi. I was thinking like an Oscar type, and maybe Ron Howard could navigate that.
Perfect. That would be this kind of Number 5, the song of Deborah and Jael.
Musical, okay. Just kidding.
A powerful war epic highlighting the heroic deeds of Deborah, a prophetess and judge, and Jael, who defeats the enemy general Sisera with a tent peg.
Dude, judges for a woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's where she hits a tent peg through a guy's head and then sings about it.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's a war musical.
Do we have one of those?
Has there ever been... Oh, that's a good question. Has there ever been a musical like in a war? I
planted the stake through his head.
I mean, Les Mis has like the French Revolution.
That's
true. That's probably the closest we've got, right?
Yeah.
It's not really a war, but it's.
And you know what? I'm not a musical type of person, but like the music from Les Mis is awesome.
All right, so that would be the style of this one.
There you go.
Number 4, the mysterious Urim and Thummim, an epic fantasy adventure following a group of heroes who embark on a quest to uncover the mystical powers and secrets of the Urim and Thummim, 2 sacred objects used for seeking God's guidance.
That reminds me of maybe like a kid's fantasy. Like what was that one? Something Zorax or something where the kids are on a different planet. It came out like...
The one that's like Jumanji in space?
Yes.
That's Zathura.
Yeah.
And it's actually based off a book written by the same guy who wrote Jumanji, which is why it's basically just space Jumanji.
It's Jumanji in space. We talked about this.
Well, this one, the Urim and Thummim are kind of a strange object. Now, they play a bigger role.
Are you saying Uma Thurman?
It does sound like I say Uma Thurman.
Adele Dazeem.
Urim and Thummim do play a big part in the LDS faith because they believe Joseph Smith had these devices. They look like spectacles, like glasses he wore, and it would translate things magically for him.
We should have a different podcast about the LDS Church, and I would love to contribute on that.
Okay. That might be a good episode as well.
Got a heart for my Mormon friends.
Number 3, The Courageous Queen Esther. A gripping historical drama featuring the remarkable story of Esther, a Jewish queen who risks her life to save her people from genocide.
For sure.
Not lesser known at that point. Though.
No.
Like that.
Yeah. And that'd be like, Elizabeth. And that, I think that won Oscars. Just saying, we've got potential.
So you could do something big like that.
Yep.
All right. Number 2 is one of my favorites. This might be lesser known, but if you listen to our podcast, it shouldn't be because we actually talked about this story. The Adventures of Ehud, the left-handed assassin. A thrilling action-packed movie depicting the daring exploits of Ehud, the left-handed judge who assassinates King Eglon and leads a rebellion. During the podcast episode where we talked about this story, said it should be a movie. Because it's got the most, like, cold line in, like, the Bible. Like, of just, like, stone cold killer. Because this guy, lefty, which is awesome that he's a lefty, goes in and says to the king, I've got a secret message from God for you. And everybody else leaves. And he's like, here's what God has to say. And then he stabs him.
So are you saying, sir,
that's awesome, that
left-handed people are more insidious?
No. If you listen to the episode, I'm saying that because they expected people to be right-handed, the fact that he was a lefty let him hide the sword and quickly draw it from a place that they didn't know.
Got it. Okay, I just got left-handed stone cold killer.
Oh, well, that's true also. Lefties are stone cold killers. We have no emotions nor souls.
You heard it here, folks.
The Wisdom of King Solomon, number 1. A captivating film showcasing the legendary wisdom of King Solomon with complex riddles, courtroom drama, and high-stakes decisions.
High-stakes decisions?
There was the one where those women were like, hey, we both say this baby is ours. And he's like, well, let's cut the baby in half.
So wise. Actually, it was, though, because he was making a greater point.
Well, because then the woman who said, no, I'd rather he... And one woman's like, fine, do it. We'll share. We'll each get a half. And then the other woman was like, no, I'd rather he live.
Dead.
He's like, you're the real mom because you'd rather give him up than let him die.
Oh, I mean, like I knew that, but it just hit me again. Okay, so what is that courtroom one where he's like, you can't handle the truth?
Right.
That would be
a military drama.
What was that one?
That's A Few Good Men.
That's the one.
Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson.
So there's your style. We should definitely get Tom Cruise
to play King Solomon.
It would be ironic.
Okay, I'm actually okay with that.
We're going for
fun.
irony.
We're going for irony.
And honestly, I think he's probably old enough to play like old and wise.
He doesn't look old though.
Do you guys know that Tom Cruise's smile is crooked?
Oh, no. You're rooting Tom Cruise for everybody.
Is. I know. I can never unsee his smile. He's got one of the best smiles of like any celebrity ever, but it is asymmetrical.
Right. If you were to draw a line down the middle of a face, we tend to see symmetry in the face.
Yes, the crack between the front two teeth.
The two front teeth is right in the middle.
Should be the middle.
For him, it's not. It's off to the side.
And you'll never unsee it.
Sorry for ruining Tom Cruise for you. And with that,
I'm saying you're welcome.
We're going to wrap up this week's podcast. Again, for the second week in a row, I have no letters to podcast@dfchurch.com. And so, whatever you're doing right now, driving a car, eating dinner, taking a shower, I don't know what you do while you listen to this, but whatever it is you are doing, I want you to stop, pause, email podcast@dfchurch.com, and just let us know, hey, I'm here, and you should talk about this, and let us know. Or
write Nathan a letter, and
just whatever you want,
and maybe share. Because you guys share the gospel on most episodes, and so we're trying to get that out.
We are definitely trying to get that out. So with that, we're going to call it to a close. We'll be back with our regularly scheduled video version next week, and we'll see you then.
Bye.